March 4, 2025, Persian Gulf, 02:17 hours local time. The USS Abraham Lincoln, CVN 72, is holding station at 24 nautical miles from the Iranian coastline, well inside what Tehran's Revolutionary Guard commanders call the Red Zone, the maritime kill corridor where their doctrine promises annihilation of any American surface combatant within 47 minutes of confirmed hostile intent. The Lincoln displaces 104,000 tons. She is, by any conventional measure, the largest, most expensive, most politically consequential target on the planet in this moment. Her flight deck is lit. She is conducting cyclic flight operations. Every 90 seconds, an aircraft is either launching or recovering. Her electromagnetic signature is enormous. She is broadcasting her position to every radar station from Bandar Abbas to Bushehr. From the roof of the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, IRGCN, Operations Center at Bandar Abbas, the duty officer is watching a blue dot on a screen and thinking one thing: that ship should not be there. His analysts have run the models. They've wargamed this scenario 400 times in the past 3 years. Their fast attack craft, loaded with C-704 anti-ship missiles, can mass swarm from 7 different staging points simultaneously. Their shore-based missile batteries have overlapping coverage arcs. Their midget submarine force is already pre-positioned. On paper, the USS Abraham Lincoln at 24 nautical miles looks like a catastrophe waiting to happen. It looks like American arrogance. It looks like an invitation. They're calculating firing solutions right now, cross-referencing the Lincoln's course, speed, and cyclic operations pattern, feeding vectors into fire control computers that have been warmed up and waiting for exactly this opportunity. They see a target. They see 4,500 American sailors. They see mathematics that favors the aggressor. They are profoundly, fatally wrong. What they cannot see is the air wall. What they cannot comprehend is the invisible architecture of coordinated lethality that has already enveloped their coastline, their radar stations, their fast boats, and their ambitions in a net so complete and so seamlessly integrated that the moment they attempt to actualize any one of those firing solutions, they will not be fighting a ship. They will be fighting a physics demonstration that they have no answer for. Today on Navy Dissected, we dismantle the Abraham Lincoln's air wall, layer by layer, from the electromagnetic deception operating 30,000 feet above their heads to the kinetic kill geometry that makes their fastest missile boats irrelevant. We prove why the most apparently exposed position on the Persian Gulf is in mathematical terms the safest place the Lincoln could possibly be. Before we understand why the air wall works, we need to honestly validate the threat. Because the IRGCN's confidence is not irrational, it is not bluster. It is grounded in a specific, documented, proven doctrine that has worried American naval planners for more than 2 decades, and dismissing it would be both intellectually dishonest and tactically dangerous. So, let us do what serious analysts do. Let us take the enemy's perspective and build the most dangerous version of his case. The IRGCN's primary anti-ship tool in the Persian Gulf is not a single weapon, it is a swarming architecture. The doctrine, which Iranian military publications openly describe as mosaic warfare, combines 3 distinct threat layers into a simultaneous attack that is specifically designed to overwhelm point defenses. The first layer is the Fast Attack Craft, FAC force. Iran operates more than 100 of these vessels, a mixture of Chinese-built C-14 catamaran attack boats and domestically produced Siraj and Zulfiqar platforms. These craft are small, between 18 and 27 meters in length, displacing between 8 and 25 tons fully loaded. They are not impressive individually. They are terrifying collectively. At full sprint, the C-14 makes 42 knots, roughly 48 miles per hour. At 24 nautical miles from the Lincoln's current position, a wave of these craft, if launched simultaneously from multiple staging points, converges on the carrier in approximately 34 minutes. Each one is armed with either the C-704 anti-ship missile, a radar-guided, sea-skimming weapon with a range of 35 kilometers, or unguided rockets, or both, plus a crew willing to conduct a ramming attack if missiles are exhausted. The C-704 specifically costs Iran approximately $800,000 per unit. Do the math. Launching 20 of them at the Abraham Lincoln represents a $16 million investment against a carrier that cost $4.7 billion to build and represents perhaps $100 billion in training, air-wing assets, and strategic value. That is a cost-exchange ratio so favorable to the attacker that it appears, on paper, to make swarming attacks economically rational. The second threat layer is the shore-based missile battery. Iran has invested heavily in coastal defense systems over the past 15 years. Their inventory includes the domestically produced Noor anti-ship missile, which is essentially a reverse-engineered Chinese C-802 with Iranian modifications, sporting a range of 120 kilometers, or roughly 65 nautical miles. They also field the Qadr missile, a turbojet-powered sea-skimming weapon with a published range of 200 kilometers, meaning that at 24 nautical miles from the Iranian coast, the Abraham Lincoln is sitting in the overlap zone of no fewer than 3 separate shore-based missile battery arcs. The Qadr descends to between 3 and 5 meters above the sea surface in its terminal approach phase. It uses an active radar seeker combined with an infrared terminal guidance system. It is, by any reasonable engineering assessment, a serious weapon that demands serious countermeasures. Each Qadr battery represents an approximate investment of $50 million in Iranian infrastructure and equipment. Against a $4.7 billion target, the Iranians calculate they can afford attrition. They can afford to lose 2 or 3 batteries if they achieve a mission kill on the Lincoln. The third layer is the psychological weapon that underpins the entire doctrine: ambiguity. The IRGCN has spent 15 years conducting harassment operations in the Persian Gulf. Boats approaching at high speed, weapons pointed at American warships, provocative maneuvers designed to force American commanders into impossible decision cycles. Do you fire first and create an international incident? Do you wait and risk being the one who hesitated? The ambiguity is the weapon. It creates hesitation. It creates political pressure. It creates the gap between the moment the threat appears and the moment the response is authorized. And in the IRGCN's doctrine, that gap is where the kill happens. The Iranian commander at Bandar Abbas has wargamed a scenario where 40 fast attack craft launch simultaneously from 7 different points, coordinated with Noor and Qadr missile salvos from shore batteries, timed to overwhelm the Lincoln's defensive systems by sheer volume, while the political authorization chain in Washington is still trying to figure out whether this is another harassment operation or the real thing. On paper, this looks like checkmate. On paper, the Iranian case for vulnerability is compelling, methodical, and frightening. But the paper doesn't account for what the Lincoln brought with her. And what the Lincoln brought with her begins not on the water, but 30,000 feet above it, in a machine that rewrites the laws of electromagnetic perception. Before the first Iranian fast attack craft engine even turns over, before a single Qadr missile warms up its seeker head, before the IRGCN duty officer at Bandar Abbas reaches for the phone to initiate the launch sequence, an invisible war has already been decided. 2 Boeing EA-18G Growler electronic attack aircraft from Electronic Attack Squadron VAQ-139, the Cougars, have been flying Rotating Combat Air Patrol (CAP) stations at 28,000 feet over the Persian Gulf for the past 7 hours. The crews are tired. The aircraft are not. Mounted under the inboard wing pylons of each Growler are 4 AN/ALQ-99 tactical jamming system pods, working in coordination with the more recently fielded Next Generation Jammer Mid-Band System, the NGJ-MB. To understand what these systems are doing to the Iranian threat picture, you first need to understand what the Iranians think they are seeing on their radar screens.
The IRGCN and the regular Iranian Navy both operate a network of coastal surveillance radars. Their primary long-range search radar is the Ghadir, an over-the-horizon backscatter radar with a claimed range of 300 kilometers, supplemented by shorter-range surface search radars aboard their vessels and at coastal installations. These radars operate on specific frequency bands, using specific pulse repetition frequencies and waveform signatures. Every radar system is, in electronic terms, as unique as a fingerprint. It broadcasts its presence and its operating characteristics every time it sends out a search pulse. And the EA-18G Growler has been collecting those fingerprints for the past 7 hours, compiling a complete electronic order of battle for every active Iranian radar in the southern Gulf. Now, here is where the physics transforms from interesting to decisive. Old electronic warfare systems from the Cold War era used brute force jamming. They broadcast high-power noise across wide frequency ranges, like turning on a leaf blower inside a concert hall. The enemy radar operator knew he was being jammed. He could see the noise on his display. More importantly, he knew where the jammer was, because the jammer was screaming its location with every transmission. And in a degraded environment, the operator could switch frequencies, employ electronic countermeasures, and still develop a partial tactical picture. Brute force worked, but it was crude, and it telegraphed your intent. The NGJ-MB does something categorically different, and understanding the difference requires understanding a technique called deceptive jamming, specifically the subset known as range gate pull-off. When an Iranian radar sends out a search pulse, that pulse is a specific electromagnetic waveform. It has a particular frequency, a precise pulse width, a defined modulation pattern. The radar's receiver is waiting for the echo of that specific waveform to return after bouncing off a target. The time it takes for the pulse to return determines the range. The Doppler shift of the returning pulse determines the velocity. These two data points, range and velocity, are what feed the fire control computer that generates a weapons solution. What the NGJ-MB does is intercept that outgoing pulse in microseconds, analyze its waveform characteristics digitally, and then transmit back a modified return signal, a false echo, that carries exactly the right frequency and modulation to be accepted as legitimate by the Iranian radar's receiver, but with the range data subtly altered. The Iranian radar operator's screen shows the Abraham Lincoln at 24 nautical miles. One sweep later, it shows 26 nautical miles. 2 sweeps later, 29 nautical miles. The ship appears to be steadily moving away from the coast at a speed that makes tactical sense for a carrier conducting flight operations. The fire control computer accepts this data as valid. It begins generating intercept vectors for weapons that will converge on a location the Lincoln will never actually occupy. This technique operates using gallium nitride, GaN semiconductor technology, which allows the NGJ-MB to generate the precise, high-power waveforms required for effective deception jamming across a much broader frequency range than previous systems. GaN transistors can operate at higher voltages, higher temperatures, and higher frequencies than the previous generation of gallium arsenide devices, which means the Growler can engage multiple radar systems simultaneously at different frequencies without degrading effectiveness. The Iranian operator sees his radar systems functioning normally. His built-in test indicators show green. His supervisor's display shows normal operation. Nobody in the Iranian facility knows that every ranging calculation their fire control systems have made in the past 4 hours has been fed false data. The missiles they would launch, if they chose to launch, are already aimed at empty ocean. The firing solutions are already corrupted. This is not jamming. This is not electronic interference. This is perception warfare conducted at the speed of light, and the Iranian operator doesn't know he's lost the first engagement, because from his perspective, the engagement hasn't started. He is entirely confident in data that has been quietly, methodically, invisibly falsified. The enemy never fired a shot, and they've already lost the information battle. That is the first wall of the air wall. But the architecture runs much deeper than electromagnetic deception. But suppose, by some combination of Iranian technical evolution, operational security, or sheer luck, the Growler's deception does not achieve full effectiveness against all systems. Suppose one shore-based battery is operating in a low probability of intercept mode, using frequency-hopping spread-spectrum transmission that makes it harder to characterize and spoof. Suppose the IRGCN is smarter than we've given them credit for this morning, and some subset of their radars has been generating valid tracking data on the Abraham Lincoln's actual position. The missile boats are in the water. The launch authorization has been issued. 20 fast attack craft are accelerating out of Bandar Abbas harbor at 38 knots, 8 minutes out. The threat is real, physical, and kinetic. This is where the second layer of the air wall activates, and it does so with a lethality that the Iranian commanders did not factor into their engagement models. The Lincoln's carrier strike group includes, at minimum, 2 Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyers operating in the threat axis. For the purposes of understanding the defensive architecture, we'll identify the relevant systems by their common designations, because what matters here is not the specific hull number, but the capability set these ships bring to the fight. Each Arleigh Burke destroyer carries the AN/SPY-1D multifunction phased array radar. The AN/SPY-1D, a passive electronically scanned array radar that rotates its radar beam electronically at 10 to 20 revolutions per minute, maintaining simultaneous track on hundreds of air and surface contacts. The destroyers have been positioned between the Lincoln and the Iranian coast since the strike group entered the Gulf, not by accident, not by tradition, but by mathematical calculation. They are in the threat axis. They are the screen. And their screens are not merely watching the fast attack craft come. They have been tracking those craft since they left their berths in Bandar Abbas harbor. Here is what the Iranian fast boat commander is experiencing in his 9th minute of the run toward the Lincoln. He does not know he is being tracked. His radar warning receiver is showing no illumination from the American destroyers. He has no indication that he has been detected. His crew is at battle stations, armed and ready, and the gap between him and the carrier is closing at a combined speed of 80 knots. What he does not know is that the fire control solution for his specific craft was completed 23 minutes ago. The destroyer's Mark 45 5-inch gun, officially designated the 5-inch/62 caliber Mark 45 lightweight gun system, has already been slewed to his bearing. The destroyer's AN/SPG-62 fire control radar, operating in the X-band, is maintaining a continuous track on his hull. The gun is waiting. The operator is waiting. The rules of engagement threshold is waiting. This is not a point defense weapon. This is not a last-ditch system. Do the math. A Mark 45 can fire 20 rounds per minute at an effective range of 24 kilometers. The 5-inch round travels at 808 meters per second. A C-14 fast attack boat, making 42 knots, operating at 24 nautical miles range, presents a closing target that the Mark 45 can engage at distances far beyond the boat's own missile envelope. The Iranian commander believes he needs to close to within 20 kilometers to fire his C-704 missiles. The destroyer can kill his boat at 22 kilometers. He will never reach his launch point. His tactical doctrine depends on getting close enough to shoot. The American tactical doctrine denies him that distance permanently, using a gun that has been in the Navy's inventory since 1971, but is controlled by fire control systems that would have seemed like science fiction in 1971. But the Mark 45 is only the beginning of the second layer. Because the fast attack craft problem is fundamentally a numbers problem, You can kill individual boats with 5-inch guns, but against a coordinated swarm of 40 boats converging from multiple vectors simultaneously, the gun is limited by its rate of fire and its single-target engagement. This is where the Navy's Rolling Airframe Missile (RAM) system, the Mark 49 guided missile weapon system, changes the mathematics of the swarm attack fundamentally. The RAM is a compact 9-inch diameter, 240-pound guided missile that uses passive radio frequency and infrared homing to engage anti-ship missiles and, in its Block 2 configuration, fast attack craft. Each RAM launcher holds 21 rounds. 2 launches per destroyer, forward and aft, gives you 42 independent intercept opportunities per hull, plus reload capacity. The RAM Block 2's dual-mode seeker, passive RF for missiles, imaging infrared for surface targets, means it does not require radar illumination from the launching ship to guide it to the target. It self-guides using the target's own electromagnetic emissions and heat signature. For an Iranian fast boat with its engines at full power, generating a significant infrared signature, and if it has its fire control radar active, a significant RF signature, the RAM is essentially an autonomous killer that needs no guidance after launch. This is not a point defense system. This is a distributed area denial architecture. The physics of a RAM intercept against a fast attack boat is worth pausing on, because the visceral reality of what happens makes the Iranian swarm doctrine's vulnerability stark. A RAM Block 2 closes on its target at Mach 2.0, roughly 680 meters per second. The warhead is an enhanced blast fragmentation type, detonating in proximity to the target and generating a directed blast wave accompanied by thousands of tungsten fragments traveling at hypersonic velocity. When those fragments intersect with a 25-ton fiberglass and aluminium fast attack boat, they do not merely damage the structure. At the velocities involved, aluminum does not bend, it tears. Fiberglass does not crack, it disintegrates. The engine compartment, which on a C-14 is located amidships, is typically the kill zone, because the fuel tanks are adjacent and the ram's blast initiation pressure wave alone can cause diesel fuel and oxygen to achieve ignition without a direct hit. The Iranian fast boat does not slow down and stop, it erupts. It ceases to be a military asset in approximately 0.4 seconds. This happens to one boat, then another, at a rate that the human mind struggles to process as real, because we don't have an experiential reference for warfare conducted at these speeds. But suppose, and we must continue to suppose because the intellectual exercise demands we follow the threat to its most dangerous conclusion, suppose a subset of Iranian fast boats operating under radio silence using radar emissions control, having survived the initial Mark 45 and RAM engagements in the outer defensive ring, has now closed to within 15 kilometers of the Abraham Lincoln. Suppose the swarm has been effective enough at absorbing interceptors that some boats are now inside the minimum effective range of the ship-based missiles and approaching the final defensive perimeter. This is the scenario that the Abraham Lincoln's air wing was built for, and this is where the air wall reveals its most aggressive layer. The Lincoln's embarked air wing includes squadrons of F/A-18E and F/A-18F Super Hornet aircraft, the E and F variants of the Boeing F/A-18 Super Hornet. In the context of the Maritime Surface Attack Mission, these aircraft carry the AGM-65 Maverick air-to-surface missile and, critically, the AGM-84H/K Standoff Land Attack Missile Expanded Response, SLAMR, as well as the AGM-154 Joint Standoff Weapon, JSOW. But against fast attack boats at close range in a swarm scenario, the Super Hornet's most relevant weapon is less glamorous and more immediately lethal. The Mark 20 Rockeye cluster munition and, in evolved engagements, the 20mm M61 Vulcan cannon firing at 6,000 rounds per minute against thin-skinned surface targets. The Super Hornet, at 300 feet altitude, making 400 knots, running perpendicular to a line of fast attack boats, can prosecute multiple targets in a single pass in a way that no ship-based system can replicate. The visual geometry of an F/A-18F inbound at low altitude at 400 knots is, from the perspective of an Iranian fast boat crew, essentially unavoidable. There is no evasive maneuver at 42 knots that creates meaningful geometry against an aircraft closing at 460 miles per hour. This is not a fair fight. It was designed not to be. The third layer of the air wall is airborne strike power, positioned by the carrier's flight operations tempo, specifically to be at the right altitude, the right range, and the right weapons state to intervene at the exact moment the ship-based systems are reaching their capacity limits. This is not defense in depth as it was understood in 1944. This is a synchronized, networked, multi-domain engagement architecture. We don't wait for the threat to arrive at the ship. We engage it in concentric rings, each ring optimized for a specific threat velocity, threat type, and threat range band, with every ring connected to every other ring through a data-sharing network that operates faster than any human being can think. The Iranian swarm doctrine was designed to defeat point defenses. It was not designed to defeat a distributed, networked organism that sees it coming before the boats leave the dock. But suppose we push still further into the adversary's best-case scenario. Suppose the swarm has, through some extraordinary combination of electronic deception, tactical innovation, and sheer attrition economics, gotten a C-704 missile in the air. The missile has cleared its launch rail, dropped its protective cover, acquired the Lincoln's radar return, and is now sea-skimming at 220 meters per second, 3 meters above the surface of the Persian Gulf, closing on the carrier from the southwest. The flight time to impact from 20 kilometers is approximately 90 seconds. 90 seconds. The time it takes to read this paragraph once. This is the scenario that shaped the design of the Abraham Lincoln's most immediately visceral defensive system. And understanding what happens in those 90 seconds is understanding why the air wall's final defensive layer represents one of the most lethally elegant pieces of engineering in the history of warfare. The AN/SLQ-32V6 Surface Electronic Warfare Improvement Program System, SEWIP Block 3, aboard the Lincoln and her screening destroyers has already been tracking the C-704's seeker head electromagnetic emissions since the moment the boat's fire control radar locked onto the carrier. SEWIP Block 3 is not a passive receiver. It is an active electronic attack system that can transmit targeted jamming against the C-704's active radar seeker in the terminal engagement phase, attempting to break the missile's lock on the carrier and drive it into the sea or into a defensive false target. If SEWIP is effective, the missile porpoises, loses altitude, and impacts the water 800 meters short of the ship. This happens silently, invisibly, with no explosions, no drama, no visual indication that anything happened except the sudden absence of a threat track on the tactical display. This is the clean outcome. But suppose the C-704's seeker has been hardened against the SEWIP jamming, or suppose the geometry of the engagement places it in a masking cone. The missile continues inbound at 3 meters altitude, 220 meters per second. Now the RIM-116 rolling airframe missile system opens engagement. The RAN launcher detects the incoming missile's RF emissions and IR signature simultaneously, computes intercept geometry, and launches. The engagement happens at ranges between 9 kilometers and 500 meters. If the RAM intercepts successfully, the C-704 becomes a fireball 400 meters from the Lincoln's hull. This is the preferred outcome. The crew hears a distant explosion. The threat track disappears from the screen. But suppose, still pressing the adversary's best case, the RAM fails. Now the Phalanx Close-In Weapon System, CIWS, designated the Mark 15 Phalanx CIWS, takes over. And this is where the physics becomes almost cinematic. The Phalanx is a 20mm M61A1 Gatling gun, firing at 4,500 rounds per minute,
mounted on a self-contained radar-guided platform that requires no external targeting input. Its AN/VPS-2 tracking radar operates in the Ka band, specifically optimized for tracking small, fast, low-altitude targets, which is a precise description of a sea-skimming anti-ship missile. The phalanx detects, tracks, and engages without human operator decision in the loop. The human operator sets the engagement parameters and enables the system. After that, it acts on its own timeline, because at 220 meters per second inbound, a human reaction time of 1.5 seconds represents 330 meters of threat travel. You cannot afford 1.5 seconds. The phalanx does it in milliseconds. When the phalanx fires, it is sending a stream of 20mm depleted uranium penetrators downrange at 1,100 meters per second. The physics of what happens when that stream intersects the C-704's guidance section is not an explosion. It is not a dramatic fireball from the missile's warhead. It is instantaneous structural failure. The forward section of the missile, which houses both the guidance electronics and the 165-kilogram warhead, is perforated by multiple penetrators in approximately 0.03 seconds. The warhead does not have time to execute its fusing sequence. The guidance electronics cease to function in approximately 0.01 seconds after the first penetrator impact. The missile, deprived of guidance and structural integrity simultaneously, tumbles. It impacts the water. The warhead may or may not detonate on water impact, depending on fuse type, but if it does, it detonates 200 meters from the hull, not against it. The ship absorbs the pressure wave. The crew hears a crack. The threat is neutralized. From missile launch to phalanx engagement to water impact, 87 seconds. From the Lincoln's perspective, the entire engagement from CWIP activation through ram launch through phalanx firing is a layered, overlapping, redundant sequence that provides 4 independent opportunities to kill the threat before it can reach the hull. This is not defense. This is a kill web. We don't wait for missiles to reach us. We reshape the electromagnetic environment before they launch, then kill the platforms before they can fire. Then kill the missiles in flight, if any survive, in layered rings of overlapping lethality that the threat must defeat sequentially, completely, and simultaneously to achieve any effect. The Iranian doctrine was not designed to defeat this architecture. It was designed to defeat the architecture of 1991. The Abraham Lincoln is not a 1991 ship. At this point in the analysis, the serious listener is entitled to ask the question that every tax-paying American should ask. Why is this ship here? Why is 4,500 human lives and $4.7 billion in hardware positioned 24 nautical miles from a hostile coastline that has explicitly and repeatedly threatened to sink American ships? Why not operate from 200 nautical miles offshore, safe from every Iranian weapon system in the current inventory, protected by distance alone? The answer to that question does not come from weapons manuals or electromagnetic theory. It comes from a bleeding human being on the ground and from the mathematics of time. The Lincoln's embarked air wing operates the F/A-18E and F/A-18F Super Hornet with a combat radius on a high-low-high mission profile of approximately 450 nautical miles. On paper, that suggests the carrier could operate from 400 nautical miles offshore and still reach targets throughout the Persian Gulf region. But combat radius is not the same as response time. Combat radius is a fuel planning number. Response time is a human being's alive or dead number. The difference between those two figures is the reason the Abraham Lincoln is 24 nautical miles from the Iranian coast instead of 240. The process of launching an aircraft from a Nimitz-class carrier, the Lincoln being hull CVN-72, the last of the Nimitz class before transitioning to Gerald R. Ford class design, takes a minimum of 14 minutes from alert to wheels up.
The aircraft must be spotted on the flight deck or retrieved from the hangar deck via elevator, a process that takes 8 to 12 minutes, depending on aircraft position. The catapult must be configured for the aircraft's launch weight. The pilot must complete pre-launch checks. The air boss must clear the deck. The catapult officer must confirm the shot. 14 minutes minimum. This is not bureaucratic inefficiency. These are the steps that prevent a 35-ton aircraft from departing the flight deck in a direction other than forward. You cannot compress them below 14 minutes without accepting unacceptable mechanical risk. So, from the moment an alert is received to the moment an aircraft is airborne, 14 minutes have passed. Now add transit time. From 24 nautical miles offshore, an FA-18E in afterburner reaches any point on the Iranian coast within approximately 4 minutes. Total response time, 18 minutes. From 240 nautical miles offshore, transit time at cruise speed is 36 minutes. Total response time, 50 minutes. That 32-minute difference is abstract until you apply it to the scenario that naval aviation was designed to support. A United States Marine Corps infantry company conducting a raid operation on Iranian soil in support of a hostage rescue mission takes a casualty. The company's corpsman immediately assesses. The patient, a 22-year-old Lance Corporal from Ohio, has sustained a penetrating abdominal wound from 7.62 millimeter fire, internal hemorrhage, no surgical capability on scene. The corpsman is doing what corpsmen do: direct pressure, tourniquet where applicable, fluids, airway management, but the internal bleeding is not something that a corpsman in the field can stop. This requires a surgeon. This requires an operating table. This requires the surgical team aboard the Abraham Lincoln or aboard the amphibious assault ship in the strike group. The golden hour, a concept developed from trauma surgery data that establishes the first 60 minutes after traumatic injury as the critical window for surgical intervention, is not a guideline. It is a physiological threshold supported by decades of trauma registry data. Survival rates for penetrating abdominal trauma with surgical intervention within 60 minutes exceed 92% in military trauma literature. Civil rates for the same injury with intervention between 60 and 90 minutes drop to below 60%. Beyond 90 minutes, you are managing a dying patient, not a wounded one, a dying one. Do the math. The casualty is reported to the Tactical Operations Center at T+0. An MV-22B Osprey tilt-rotor aircraft, the primary carrier onboard delivery and medical evacuation platform for carrier strike group operations, requires 8 minutes to complete pre-launch checks and achieve rotor engagement under alert conditions. From 24 nautical miles offshore, the MV-22B, cruising at 240 knots, reaches the casualty's location in approximately 6 minutes. Surgical team is prepared and waiting. Total time from casualty report to surgical intervention, 8 minutes pre-launch, plus 6 minutes transit, plus 4 minutes patient transfer to surgical suite, equals 18 minutes. The golden hour has 42 minutes remaining. The surgeon has time to work. The Lance Corporal from Ohio goes home. From 240 nautical miles offshore, the transit time alone for the MV-22B is 60 minutes. Add 8 minutes pre-launch, 4 minutes transfer. Total time, 72 minutes. The golden hour expired 12 minutes ago. The Lance Corporal from Ohio is not dead yet, but the trajectory of his physiology at 72 minutes post-injury, with ongoing internal hemorrhage and no surgical intervention, means the surgeon is not saving a life. The surgeon is managing a death. Not 23 nautical miles, not 25 nautical miles. 24 nautical miles is where the golden hour and the threat envelope mathematics converge to their optimal solution. That is where the carrier is. That is the calculation that was made not by admirals in Washington, but by operations research analysts who modeled thousands of scenarios and produced a single number. And somewhere in the strike group tonight, that same calculation is keeping a sailor alert at his station knowing that the distance between where the Lincoln is and where the Iranian batteries are is not a number pulled from a doctrine manual. It is a number pulled from survival probability curves and reaction time models and physiological threshold data. The watch is set at the precise distance where human lives are most protected. Now step back. Pull back far enough to see the entire architecture simultaneously, because what you've been examining in each section is not a collection of separate systems. It is one organism. And understanding it as an organism, understanding how the nervous system connects the limbs, is understanding why the Abraham Lincoln's air wall is not merely effective, but genuinely and terrifyingly unprecedented in the history of naval warfare. The Abraham Lincoln herself is the power projection platform. She is carrying, at any given time, approximately 65 to 75 aircraft across her air wing, including 2 Super Hornet strike fighter squadrons, 1 Super Hornet strike fighter attack squadron, an EA-18G Growler electronic attack squadron, an E-2D Advanced Hawkeye Airborne Early Warning and Control Squadron, an MH-60R/S helicopter, Sea Combat and Sea Strike Squadron, and a C-2A Greyhound, or CMV-22B Osprey logistics element. Each of these components has a specific role in the kill web, but the critical insight is this: they do not operate as separate entities. They share information. They share situational awareness. They share targeting data. And they do this through the Cooperative Engagement Capability System, CEC, which is the nervous system that transforms a collection of platforms into a single, integrated weapon. The CEC is a high-bandwidth, real-time data-sharing network that allows every node in the carrier strike group, every ship, every aircraft, every submarine that has a connection to the network, to maintain an identical, shared tactical picture. Not similar pictures, not pictures that are reconciled every few minutes. The same picture, updated continuously, with a latency measured in milliseconds. When the E-2D Advanced Hawkeye, flying at 25,000 feet with its AN/APY-9 ultra-high-frequency radar, painting targets at 350 nautical miles range, detects an Iranian fast boat leaving Bandar Abbas harbor, that contact does not appear on the Hawkeye's screen. It appears on every screen in the strike group simultaneously. The destroyer's fire control computer sees it. The Lincoln's Combat Direction Center sees it. The F/A-18F pilot's helmet display sees it. The submarine's tactical display sees it. One radar, one detection, one contact, shared across the entire kill web in real time. The implication of this architecture is what makes the Iranian swarm doctrine not merely ineffective, but practically suicidal. The swarm doctrine depends on ambiguity. It depends on attacking from multiple directions simultaneously, forcing defenders to prioritize and choose, creating the possibility that some boats slip through unengaged, while defenders are occupied with others. CEC eliminates the ambiguity. Every single boat in the swarm is tracked by every platform in the strike group from the moment it leaves the harbor. The engagement is not reactive, it is predictive. Fire control solutions are computed before engagement is authorized. When authorization comes, every system in the kill web engages its pre-assigned targets simultaneously, not sequentially. The destroyers are not doing triage. They are executing a pre-computed engagement plan that was generated by the networked tactical system hours before the first boat reached the harbor entrance. The E-2D Hawkeye specifically deserves more than a passing mention in this architecture because it is the component that makes CEC viable at the strike group level. The Hawkeye's AN/APY-9 radar is not merely a surveillance system, it is a battle management system. It can simultaneously track over 1,000 contacts, classify them by radar cross-section, velocity, and emission profile, assign threat priority scores, and distribute engagement recommendations to all CEC-connected platforms. The Hawkeye crew of 5, 2 pilots and 3 naval flight officers, is not flying a radar plane. They are running the battle. They see the Iranian fast boats, the shore-based missile batteries, the patrol boats, the helicopter, the cargo aircraft that might be a surveillance platform, the fishing vessel that has been circling the same point for 6 hours and might not be a fishing vessel. They manage the information architecture that allows 4 destroyers, a cruiser, 2 attack submarines, and 70 aircraft to operate as a single organism rather than as a formation of independent actors. Remove the Hawkeye, and the networked architecture loses its conductor. The individual instruments are still excellent, but the symphony stops. The attack submarines in the strike group represent the offensive punch that Iranian planners consistently underestimate in their threat assessments. A Virginia-class attack submarine operating in the shallow waters of the Persian Gulf carries the BG M109 Tomahawk Land Attack Missile, TLAM, in its Virginia Payload Modules, VPM, which provide 28 additional Tomahawk magazine positions beyond the torpedo tubes. The Tomahawk Block 5, currently in service, has a range of 1,000 nautical miles and carries either a conventional, unitary warhead or, in its multi-mission variant, a maritime strike warhead for use against surface combatants. The significance of submarine-launched Tomahawks in this context is not primarily their anti-ship capability. It is their targeting function against the shore-based missile battery infrastructure. Every Iranian Noor and Qadr battery that threatens the Abraham Lincoln is a pre-planned Tomahawk target. The GPS coordinates of those batteries are loaded into the submarine's fire control system before the strike group enters the Gulf. If the Iranians fire, the submarine fires 14 minutes later, not at the missile that was just launched, at the launcher, at the battery, at the command and control node that authorized the launch. The Iranian commander who presses the button to fire his Qadr missile will have 14 minutes before the location he pressed that button from ceases to exist. This is the offensive dimension of the air wall that no Iranian wargame adequately incorporates. The Sea-Whip Block 3 system on the Lincoln and her escorts provides what planners call the electronic attack layer of the defensive architecture. Operating in coordination with the Growler's airborne jamming platforms, SEWIP Block 3 generates a 360-degree electronic warfare bubble around the strike group that degrades, deceives, and disrupts hostile radar systems, communication links, and missile guidance systems simultaneously. The Iranian commander who tries to use radio to coordinate his swarm attack will find his communications degraded. The Iranian radar operator who tries to get a clean track on the Lincoln will find his radar returns manipulated. The Iranian missile seeker that tries to lock on the carrier's radar cross-section will find itself chasing a target that keeps moving away. The entire electromagnetic environment around the Abraham Lincoln is being actively managed to create a false reality for every Iranian sensor in the threat area. This is not a recent innovation, but the scale, the precision, and the integration of the current capability represent a qualitative leap beyond anything the IRGCN has trained against. This is not a carrier group. This is a networked kill architecture that happens to have a carrier at its center. Remove the Hawkeye and you lose the conductor. Remove the Growlers and you lose the electromagnetic shield. Remove the submarines and you lose the offensive deterrent. Remove the SEWIP systems and you lose the close-in electronic defense. Remove the CEC integration and you lose the organism, leaving only the individual components, which are still formidable but vulnerable to the saturation strategy the Iranians have been developing. But with all components present, networked and synchronized, the Iranian attack planner is not facing a target, he is facing a geometric proof. His attack is not a possibility. It is a variable in an equation that has already been solved, and the solution is not in his favor. There is a final element of the air wall's architecture that deserves specific attention because it represents the most recent evolution of the Lincoln's strike group capability and the one that Iranian analysts have been slowest to incorporate into their threat assessments. The integration of F-35C Lightning II stealth strike fighters into carrier air wing deployments changed the character of the offensive dimension of carrier power in ways that the air wall discussion would be incomplete without addressing. The Lincoln has operated with the F-35C in deployments since 2019, when Strike Fighter Squadron V, FA-147, the Argonauts, made the type's first operational carrier deployment. The F-35C's relevance to the air wall architecture is not primarily its stealth characteristics, though those are significant. It is the aircraft's sensor fusion and electronic intelligence collection capability. The F-35C's AN/APG-81 Active Electronically Scanned Array AESA radar operates in modes that include electronic attack, mapping, air-to-air engagement, and maritime surface search. But the aircraft's most strategically relevant capability in this context is its function as a forward intelligence collection node. Operating at distances from the Lincoln that no previous carrier aircraft could achieve undetected, the F-35C can penetrate Iranian airspace or operate in the near-coastal radar shadow areas that are technically inside Iranian coverage but geometrically degraded, collecting electronic intelligence (ELINT) on Iranian radar emissions, communication frequencies, and unit positions, and transmitting that data back to the CEC network in real time. The Iranian commanders at Bandar Abbas, Bushehr, and the IRGCN's Southern Command facilities are aware that they are being observed by American satellites and by P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft flying outside their airspace. What they cannot be certain of is whether, at any given moment, there is an F-35C-40 miles inside their radar coverage, quietly mapping their electronic order of battle and transmitting it to the Lincoln's Combat Direction Center. This uncertainty, this inability to know with confidence whether the electromagnetic picture they are looking at is the real picture or a constructed deception, is itself a form of deterrence. The air wall operates not only in the physical domain, engaging physical threats. It operates in the cognitive domain, creating doubt, uncertainty, and hesitation in the minds of the adversary commanders who must weigh the decision to act. Doubt is a weapon. Uncertainty is a weapon. When the Iranian duty officer at Bandar Abbas cannot trust his own radar picture, cannot trust his own communications, cannot trust that the information his systems are producing is accurate and uncompromised, the decision to initiate hostilities becomes not a military calculation, but a gamble with catastrophic consequences in both directions. This is the deepest layer of the air wall. Not hardware, not software. The manufactured uncertainty that paralyzes the adversary's decision cycle before the first physical engagement ever occurs. This cognitive dimension of the air wall is perhaps the least discussed and most important aspect of what makes the Abraham Lincoln's current posture in the Persian Gulf something other than recklessness. The ship is not there because American naval planners believe it is invulnerable. No ship is invulnerable. The ship is there because American naval planners understand that the combination of kinetic capability, electronic warfare dominance, networked sensor architecture, and cognitive uncertainty creation makes the cost-benefit calculation of attacking the Lincoln so unfavorable to the Iranians that the deterrent value of the presence exceeds the risk of the positioning. The ship's presence is itself the primary weapon. The message it sends, that America can position its most powerful naval platform 24 nautical miles from a declared adversary's coast and operate there continuously, conducting flight operations, projecting power, enforcing maritime presence, is a statement that cannot be made from 240 nautical miles. The deterrent effect requires proximity. The math demands it. Return now to where we started. March 4th, 2025. Persian Gulf. 0 to 17 hours. The USS Abraham Lincoln at 24 nautical miles from the Iranian coast. The IRGCN duty officer at Bandar Abbas watching the blue dot on his screen. He has, in the intervening time of this discussion, issued preliminary alert orders to his fast attack craft squadrons. Not launch orders, alert orders. His crews are at their boats. Engines are warming up. The weapons are armed. He is waiting for one more piece of intelligence before he makes the call that will define his career, his legacy, and, if he is wrong, the remainder of his life. He is waiting for confirmation that his tracking data is accurate, that the position his systems are showing for the Abraham Lincoln is real and not manufactured. He is waiting for something that will never come, because the data his systems are producing has been quietly, methodically, and invisibly compromised by 7 hours of growler operations that his technical staff cannot detect and his radar operators cannot see. The confirmation he is waiting for will not arrive because the electromagnetic reality around his facility has been reshaped. He is staring at a perfect picture of a world that does not exist. In the Lincoln's Combat Direction Center, a petty officer second class from North Carolina, 23 years old, who enlisted at 18 because he wanted to do something that mattered, is watching his electronic warfare display. He has been on watch for 6 hours. His relief is 40 minutes away. He is tired in the way that only sustained concentration produces, the kind of tired that coffee cannot fix. But his hands are steady on the console, and his eyes are clear, and the data flowing through his station is accurate, real-time, and complete. He sees the Iranian boats at their berths. He sees the battery radars in their known positions. He sees nothing that his system has not already catalogued and assessed. Everything is nominal. Everything is exactly where the engagement model predicted it would be. He does not know that he is, in this moment, the tip of a spear that extends from satellites in orbit to submarines on the bottom to aircraft 30,000 feet above his head. He knows his station. He knows his job. He is running geometry problems under pressure at 2 in the morning with the same precision that he would at 2 in the afternoon on a clear day in Norfolk. The Iranian duty officer finally makes his call. He orders his fast attack craft back to their berths. Not because he has received intelligence that the Americans are too strong. He has received no such intelligence. He is ordering his boats back because his intelligence is not confirmable. His radar picture is producing inconsistencies he cannot explain. His communications are degraded in ways his technical team cannot diagnose, and the risk calculus of initiating hostilities without confirmed, reliable tactical data is one that his operational orders explicitly prohibit. He does not know he has just been defeated. He thinks he has made a prudent decision based on incomplete information. From the perspective of the Abraham Lincoln's air wall, these two outcomes are indistinguishable. Both mean the boats stayed in the harbor. Both mean 4,500 American sailors complete their deployment and go home. That is the geometry. Not the missiles, not the radar, not the electronic jamming individually, but the totality of a system designed to make the cost of aggression incalculable, the tactical picture unreliable, and the decision to attack not a military option, but a guaranteed catastrophe. The Iranian Noor missiles are still on their launchers. The fast attack craft are still at their berths. The IRGCN commanders are still in their operation centers. Not because they chose restraint, because the geometry chose it for them. 3 weeks from now, when the Abraham Lincoln completes her patrol and transits the Strait of Hormuz outbound, the Persian Gulf will look exactly as it looked before she arrived. The Iranian facilities will be intact. The fast boats will be moored. No shots fired. No damage claimed. No victory announced by either side. The Lincoln will transit in daylight, flight deck visible, aircraft spotted on deck, the most conspicuous possible departure. A final statement that the calculation was correct from beginning to end. And in the IRGCN's operations centers, the analysts will begin the process of revising their threat assessments, updating their models, and trying to understand what they did not see. They will not find it easily. Because what defeated them was not a weapon. It was a set of interlocking principles operating across 5 domains simultaneously: the electromagnetic domain, the kinetic domain, the information domain, the cognitive domain,
and the maritime domain. Against that kind of integration, a swarming doctrine built on physical proximity and volume of fire is not a threat. It is a targeting solution for the people who designed the air wall. The petty officer second class from North Carolina finishes his watch. He logs his last entry, notes the current status of all Iranian naval activity as nominal and unchanged, hands over to his relief, and heads to the mess deck for coffee that is going to taste exactly as bad as it always does at 0300. He will not receive a medal for tonight. His name will not appear in any operational summary that will ever be declassified in his lifetime. He will be home in 4 months. He will go back to North Carolina and visit his parents and try to explain to people at the barbecue what he did out there for 8 months. And he will find, as every sailor finds, that the story is impossible to tell to someone who wasn't there. Not because it involves classified information, because the deepest truth of what happened in the Persian Gulf in March of 2025 is not a story about ships or missiles or radar systems. It is a story about geometry, about the decision to put a ship precisely 24 nautical miles from a hostile coast because the math demanded it, about building a defensive architecture so complete, so integrated, so anticipatory of every threat the adversary could conceive that the deterrent became the weapon, and the weapon was never fired. The geometry was solved before the Lincoln ever entered the Gulf. The physics were accounted for before the first growler took off. The equations were balanced before the first Iranian fastboat commander looked at his radar screen and saw a ship that was exactly where the Americans wanted him to believe it was, and exactly nowhere near where it needed to be for his attack to succeed. The line is drawn at 24 nautical miles. The watch is set at exactly that distance, not 23, not 25, exactly 24. The air wall holds. The geometry does not negotiate. If this breakdown of how the Abraham Lincoln's networked air defense architecture defeats the IRGCN's swarming doctrine changed how you understand modern carrier warfare, type air wall in the comments right now. Tell me which layer of the defense surprised you most, the electromagnetic deception, the kinetic kill architecture, or the cognitive domain operations that never make the headlines. And if you want to go deeper into the systems that make American naval power the most formidable force projection capability in human history, the subscribe button is right there. We dissect the architecture that other channels describe. Welcome to Navy Dissected.